Imagine a world where a single accusation whispered in the shadows of a cathedral could topple kings, where the testimony of a tortured peasant could unravel dynasties that had ruled for centuries, where the contents of a confiscated letter could ignite wars that would consume entire generations in flames of revenge and political ambition. This was the reality of medieval Europe, where trials became theaters of power so explosive that their verdicts could redraw maps, rewrite histories, and reshape the very foundations of Christian civilization through spectacles of justice that were anything but just. These were not merely legal proceedings, but carefully orchestrated political dramas where guilt and innocence mattered far less than the survival of kingdoms, the preservation of dynasties, and the ruthless calculations of rulers who understood that courtrooms could be more effective than battlefields for destroying enemies and consolidating power. From the gilded halls of papal palaces to the fortress chambers of royal castles, from the hushed councils of cathedral chapters to the blood-soaked platforms of public execution, medieval trials unfolded as grand performances where the script was written by political necessity, the actors played for their very lives, and the audience bore witness to the terrifying spectacle of justice transformed into the ultimate weapon of state terror and dynastic ambition. These scandalous proceedings revealed the dark machinery of medieval power, where legal process became political theater, where truth was subordinated to expedience, and where the lives of individuals, noble and common, sacred and secular, could be sacrificed on the altar of royal convenience and ecclesiastical authority without the slightest pretense of genuine justice or moral accountability. The trial of Joan of Arc stands as perhaps history's most politically motivated judicial murder, where a 19-year-old peasant girl who had dared to challenge the established order by claiming divine revelation was systematically destroyed through a legal process so transparently corrupt that even its contemporary observers recognized it as a travesty designed to serve English political interests rather than divine justice or legal truth. The Maid of Orleans had committed the unforgivable crime of inspiring French resistance against English occupation, while claiming direct communication with saints and angels, creating a political and religious crisis that threatened not only English military ambitions, but the entire theological framework that reserved divine revelation for male ecclesiastical authorities. The trial proceedings, conducted by Pierre Cauchon, Bishop of Beauvais in cooperation with English authorities, represented a masterpiece of legal manipulation where every procedural safeguard was violated, every canon law requirement was ignored, and every principle of fair judgment was sacrificed to achieve a predetermined verdict that would legitimize the execution of France's most effective military leader. Joan faced a tribunal composed entirely of her political enemies, was denied legal counsel, was subjected to months of psychological torture and physical intimidation, and was presented with theological questions deliberately designed to create logical traps that would make any answer appear heretical to judges who had already decided her fate before the trial began. The charges against Joan included wearing male clothing, claiming direct divine revelation, and refusing to submit to church authority, accusations that revealed the trial's true purpose of suppressing female autonomy, popular religious expression, and political resistance through the systematic destruction of an individual who had become a symbol of hope for oppressed peoples across Europe. The transcript of Joan's trial, preserved in meticulous detail, documents one of history's most courageous examples of individual resistance to institutional tyranny, as the teenage peasant consistently outmaneuvered her educated prosecutors with intelligence, dignity, and unwavering commitment to her divine mission, despite facing certain death for her refusal to submit to political pressure disguised as religious authority. The political impact of Joan's execution extended far beyond France to influence the relationship between secular and religious authority throughout Europe, as her martyrdom demonstrated the dangers of allowing ecclesiastical courts to serve political masters while claiming divine authorization for obviously temporal judgments. The trial of the Knights Templar, orchestrated by King Philip IV of France, represents one of history's most systematic campaigns of judicial persecution designed to destroy an entire religious military order while confiscating their vast wealth to solve royal financial problems through the weaponization of heresy accusations and torture-extracted confessions. The Templars had accumulated enormous wealth and political influence through their role as international bankers and military defenders of Christian territories in the Holy Land, creating a financial empire that threatened royal authority while providing convenient scapegoats for France's economic problems and military failures in the Crusades. On October 13, 1307, Philip IV ordered the simultaneous arrest of all Templars in France on charges of heresy, blasphemy, sodomy, and idol worship, launching a coordinated campaign of persecution that would ultimately destroy an organization that had served Christian Europe for nearly 2 centuries, while transferring their assets to royal control. The charges against the Templars were largely fabricated through torture sessions designed to extract confessions of secret rituals, including spitting on the cross, denying Christ-worshipping demonic idols, and engaging in homosexual practices that would justify their execution, while providing theological cover for property confiscation. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars, endured years of imprisonment and torture before finally recanting his forced confessions and proclaiming the innocence of his order, resulting in his execution by burning, while demonstrating the political nature of proceedings that claimed religious authority for obviously financial motivations. The trial proceedings revealed extensive cooperation between French royal authorities and Pope Clement V, who had been intimidated into supporting Philip's persecution through threats of political and military action against papal territories, demonstrating how ecclesiastical authority could be corrupted to serve temporal interests through systematic intimidation and political manipulation. The destruction of the Templars had profound consequences for European finance, military organization, and the relationship between secular and religious authority, while establishing precedents for using heresy accusations to justify the systematic persecution of wealthy institutions whose assets could be confiscated to serve royal convenience. The trial of Pope Boniface VIII, posthumously prosecuted by Philip IV of France, represents an unprecedented example of royal authority challenging papal supremacy through judicial proceedings designed to destroy the reputation and political legacy of the most powerful pope in medieval history, while establishing French dominance over ecclesiastical authority. Boniface VIII had issued the papal bull Unum Sanctam, asserting absolute papal authority over temporal rulers, creating a direct challenge to Philip's sovereignty that required systematic response through legal proceedings that would delegitimize papal claims while justifying French resistance to ecclesiastical interference in royal governance. The charges against Boniface included heresy, simony murder, sodomy, and devil worship. Accusations so extreme and obviously fabricated that they revealed the political desperation behind Philip's campaign to destroy papal authority through character assassination and posthumous persecution that claimed legal legitimacy for obviously vindictive proceedings. The trial featured testimony from carefully selected witnesses who had been bribed, threatened, or tortured into providing damaging testimony against the deceased pope, creating a legal spectacle that demonstrated the lengths to which royal authority would go to establish supremacy over ecclesiastical power through systematic defamation disguised as judicial investigation. Although the posthumous trial ultimately failed to achieve formal condemnation of Boniface, the proceedings succeeded in damaging papal prestige while establishing precedents for royal resistance to ecclesiastical authority that would influence church-state relationships throughout the later medieval period. The trial of William Wallace, conducted by English authorities, represents a paradigmatic example of using judicial proceedings to transform political resistance into criminal behavior, while creating martyrs whose execution would inspire rather than suppress national liberation movements. Wallace had committed the crime of leading Scottish resistance against English occupation, achieving military victories that threatened English control while inspiring popular uprisings that challenged the legitimacy of foreign rule through armed resistance that authorities needed to criminalize through legal proceedings. The charges against Wallace included treason, murder, arson, and sacrilege, accusations that sought to transform military resistance into criminal behavior while denying the political nature of his actions through legal frameworks that portrayed national liberation as personal criminality, deserving extreme punishment. The trial was conducted according to English law rather than Scottish legal traditions. demonstrating the imperial nature of proceedings designed to assert English authority over Scottish legal systems while denying Scottish claims to independent governance and legal self-determination. Wallace's execution by hanging, drawing and quartering was designed as spectacular public demonstration of English power, while creating a martyrdom that would inspire Scottish resistance for generations, revealing the political miscalculation behind legal proceedings that sought to suppress nationalism through systematic brutality disguised as judicial punishment. The trial of Girolamo Savonarola in Florence represents a complex example of religious, political and social conflicts resolved through judicial proceedings that eliminated a charismatic reformer whose moral authority threatened both ecclesiastical hierarchy and secular political arrangements. Savonarola had gained enormous popular support through his preaching against corruption in both church and state, creating a political movement that challenged papal authority, Medici political control, and the social arrangements that benefited Florence's wealthy elite through moral appeals that attracted widespread popular support. The charges against Savonarola included heresy, schism and sedition, accusations that sought to delegitimize his moral authority while portraying his reform movement as threatening to both religious orthodoxy and political stability through legal frameworks that criminalized popular religious expression. The trial proceedings involved extensive torture designed to extract confessions that would justify execution while destroying Savonarola's reputation through forced admissions of guilt that contradicted his previous moral teachings and political positions. The execution of Savonarola by hanging and burning eliminated a powerful voice for reform, while demonstrating the willingness of established authorities to use judicial murder to suppress popular movements that threatened existing power arrangements through moral rather than military challenges. The trial of the Cathars during the Albigensian Crusade represents a systematic campaign of genocide disguised as legal proceedings against heretics, where entire populations were destroyed through judicial processes that claimed religious authority for ethnic cleansing and property confiscation on an unprecedented scale. The Cathar movement in southern France represented not only religious dissent, but cultural autonomy that threatened both papal authority and French royal ambitions for territorial expansion, creating political motivations for persecution that were disguised as religious necessity through legal frameworks that criminalized entire communities. The Inquisition proceedings against Cathars involved mass trials, torture-extracted confessions, and systematic property confiscation that destroyed the economic and social foundations of southern French civilization while transferring wealth and territory to northern French nobles who participated in the persecution. The legal justification for Cathar persecution relied on theological arguments about the threat posed by dualist heresy to Christian civilization, though the actual proceedings revealed obvious political and economic motivations for systematic destruction of communities whose only crime was religious and cultural independence. The trial of Robert the Bruce for treason against English authority demonstrates how judicial proceedings could be used to criminalize legitimate claims to national sovereignty while transforming dynastic disputes into legal frameworks for imperial domination and resistance suppression. Bruce's claim to the Scottish throne represented a challenge to English overlordship that required legal response through treason accusations designed to delegitimize Scottish independence claims while asserting English authority over Scottish succession disputes and territorial governance. The political complications of Bruce's trial arose from his initial submission to English authority, followed by his rebellion and coronation as King of Scotland, creating legal ambiguities that revealed the contested nature of sovereignty claims in medieval Europe, where feudal relationships conflicted with emerging national identities. The failure to capture and try Bruce led to his transformation from legal criminal into national hero, demonstrating how judicial proceedings could create martyrdom and resistance symbols when they failed to achieve their intended goals of political legitimization and opposition suppression. The international implications of these scandalous trials extended far beyond their immediate political contexts to influence legal development, religious authority, and political theory throughout medieval Europe, while establishing precedents that would shape the relationship between law and power for centuries. The systematic corruption of legal proceedings for political purposes revealed fundamental weaknesses in medieval justice systems that claimed divine authority while serving obviously temporal interests, creating crises of legitimacy that contributed to the eventual development of legal reforms, designed to protect individual rights against institutional abuse. The documentation and publicity surrounding these trials created new forms of political discourse, where legal proceedings became subjects of international attention and criticism, establishing precedents for using judicial scandals to challenge political authority and expose institutional corruption through systematic analysis of legal proceedings. The propaganda value of these trials for both prosecutors and defendants demonstrated the emerging importance of public opinion in medieval politics as legal proceedings became venues for competing narratives about legitimacy, authority, and resistance that influenced popular attitudes toward religious and secular institutions. The legacy of medieval trial scandals continues to influence contemporary understanding of legal systems, political authority, and individual rights through historical examples that reveal the persistent dangers of allowing legal proceedings to serve institutional interests rather than genuine justice and social welfare. Understanding these historical examples provides crucial insight into contemporary legal systems that continue to exhibit similar patterns of political manipulation, procedural corruption, and institutional abuse, disguised as legitimate judicial authority, serving abstract principles rather than concrete power interests. The medieval experience with scandalous trials demonstrates that legal systems require constant vigilance and democratic oversight to prevent their transformation into weapons of political oppression and institutional control rather than mechanisms for protecting individual rights and maintaining social justice. As you contemplate these historical examples of legal proceedings that served political theater rather than genuine justice while claiming divine and legal authority for obviously corrupt and vindictive purposes, consider how contemporary legal systems continue to exhibit similar patterns of institutional abuse and political manipulation disguised as legitimate judicial procedure. The medieval experience with scandalous trials reveals that the corruption of legal proceedings for political purposes represents a constant threat to justice and social stability that requires ongoing resistance and reform to prevent legal systems from serving institutional power rather than individual rights and social welfare. If this exploration of history's most scandalous trials has revealed patterns of legal corruption and political manipulation that extend beyond medieval contexts into contemporary judicial systems and institutional behavior, share your insights. Subscribe for more investigations into the relationship between law and power. And remember that understanding historical precedents provides essential knowledge for recognizing and resisting contemporary forms of judicial corruption that serve political rather than legal purposes. Would you have recognized the political motivations behind these elaborate judicial spectacles while living under medieval legal systems that claimed divine authority for obviously corrupt proceedings designed to serve institutional power rather than genuine justice or social protection?